In this video, you will learn about the major ascending and descending tracts of the central nervous system that relay sensory and motor information. Let's start with a big picture view. You can think of the spinal cord as a two-way information superhighway. Ascending tracts are like the incoming lanes that bring sensory input from receptors in your skin, muscles, and joints up to the brain for processing. Descending tracts are like the outgoing lanes, carrying motor commands from your brain down to activate specific muscles. Let's start with the descending tracts, the pathways for motor control. These tracts carry motor commands from the brain to the lower motor neurons, which then activate skeletal muscles. The corticospinal tract begins in the motor cortex at the precentral gyrus of the frontal lobe, where upper motor neurons send their axons down through the brainstem and into the spinal cord. These axons eventually synapse with lower motor neurons, which carry the signal through spinal nerves to the skeletal muscles. For instance, when you decide to raise your right hand, neurons in your left motor cortex fire, sending signals down the corticospinal tract, crossing over in the medulla, and activating lower motor neurons in the ventral horn of the spinal cord on the right side. Finally, the axons of the lower motor neurons carry action potentials out through spinal nerves to stimulate contraction of muscles in your right arm. Like the corticospinal tracts, corticonuclear tracts are descending tracts that start with upper motor neurons in the motor cortex. However, the lower motor neurons of the corticonuclear tracts are in the cranial nerve nuclei of the brainstem. The efferent fibers of these pathways are in the cranial nerves. The illustration here shows the pathway for the facial nerves that control the muscles to produce facial expressions. Upper motor neurons are located in the motor cortex. Their axons form the descending tracts, such as the corticospinal and corticonuclear tracts. Lower motor neurons are found in the anterior horn of the spinal cord or in cranial nerve nuclei. Their axons extend into the peripheral nervous system to directly stimulate muscles. If either one is damaged, the effects are different. Upper motor neuron lesions often cause spastic paralysis, leading to loss of voluntary motor control with increased muscle tone and exaggerated reflexes. Lower motor neuron lesions cause flaccid paralysis, leading to complete loss of resting muscle tone and reflexes. These distinctions are clinically important in diagnosing spinal cord and brain injuries. Now let's switch gears to the ascending tracts, which carry sensory information from the body to the brain. Sensory pathways typically involve three neurons in sequence. First order, primary afferent neurons are pseudo-unipolar neurons with their cell bodies located in the dorsal root ganglia. They receive input from sensory receptors and send action potentials into the spinal cord through the dorsal root. Second order neurons are located within the CNS, either in the spinal cord or medulla oblongata. These neurons cross the midline and carry the signal upward to the thalamus. Third-order neurons found in the thalamus relay the information to the postcentral gyrus of the parietal lobe, which is the primary somatosensory cortex. This is where you consciously perceive touch, temperature, or pain. So, when you feel pressure on your skin, that sensation travels from the receptor through these three neurons and finally reaches your brain where you become aware of it. There are two key ascending pathways to know. The dorsal column system carries information about fine touch, vibration, and proprioception, your awareness of body position. The first order neurons enter through the dorsal root and ascend without synapsing in the spinal cord. They travel up the dorsal white columns to the medulla oblongata. There, they synapse with second-order neurons, which cross to the opposite side and ascend to the thalamus. The other major sensory pathway of the spinal cord, called the spine-othalamic tract, carries signals related to pain and temperature. First-order neurons enter the dorsal horn of the spinal cord and synapse with the second-order sensory neuron. The second-order neurons then cross the midline within the spinal cord and ascend through the spinothalamic tract to the thalamus. Now let's tie it all together. Ascending tracts carry sensory information from receptors to the brain using first, second, and third order neurons. Descending tracts carry motor commands from the brain to muscles using upper and lower motor neurons. Together, they create a continuous feedback loop, sensation in, movement out, that allows you to react, move, and interact with your environment smoothly and effectively.